Hello! Hi, I'm Becca, and this is my BookTube. Let's get comfy. Okay. Hi friends, welcome. Welcome back. If you got to watch one of my other videos before you found this one, welcome. If this is the first video that you're getting to see that is mine. I am just starting my BookTube in the month of March in 2025, and so I decided that for my January-February wrap-up video, I was just going to do them both together. Some people will do every single month a wrap-up. I might get to that point eventually, but I think right now I'm just going to couple them. So I'm going to do January and February today, and then when I finish March and April, I'll do a video at the end of April, beginning of May, and just try that for this year. So I'll have 2 months for each wrap-up video. So funny story, I actually already recorded this video. I recorded it on Thursday last week, and it went okay. I definitely realized, like, well, one, I went back and looked at the video, and I'm so annoyed because I set up the camera in one spot, and when I did a camera test with it, for some reason I told myself that it didn't look good, and that was the wrong spot to put the camera. So I picked a different spot, moved it, and then when I went back to look at both clips in a different room, like moved myself to the living room to look over my stuff, the original test video that I did looked great. The light was great, the quality was great, it looked so good. And then this other angle that I had picked and had like jumped through hoops to get the lighting right on it and stuff was not that great. Like, I'll show you some clips. So yeah, and then also there was a lot of like sound issues that kind of happened while I was recording. There was one section that I had to record twice, because I recorded it, and then when I stopped recording, I like went back and kind of just like clicked through to make sure everything was okay, and there was like a weird buzzing, crackling sound happening, so I went back and re-recorded a section. So it was just too many things, and I had been kind of delaying finding this microphone, and then when I had those audio issues happen, I was like, nope, time to get out the mic. So we got a little bit of an upgrade here. Now I just got to remember to keep it at the appropriate distance from my mouth, so that way we're not doing something weird. We're not doing something weird and the sound is okay. Because we're starting with the January and February recap, we should also start with beginning of the year. So every year my reading goal has been roughly 50 books. I always feel like that's pretty attainable for me, because I'll have some months where I only read like 2 or 3 books, and then I'll have other months when I have less going on or get into like a really good series that I binge, and I can end up having like 6 books in a month. And so I feel like 50 is always kind of a good safe spot for what I know to be my reading habits. I've achieved that goal in the past. I've also missed it in the past. I had a year where my goal was 50, and then by like October or November, I realized that I was still in the low 20s. I was at like 23 books for the whole year. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to read over 25 books in the next 2 or 3 months. Like, that's so not happening. So that year I dropped my goal down to 40, I believe, and I still didn't even achieve the 40. I just kind of made myself feel better by not being as far behind as I originally was. So yeah, my goal is 50 again this year. Maybe someday it'll get moved up to a higher number, but for right now it's just 50. And I feel like so far so good. We are coming to the end of March. We've got 1 week of March left, and I believe I'm at 9 books total read. So I mean, I feel like that's a good number. All right, so in January and February I read to completion. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Yeah, I guess 7. For some reason I thought it was 9. Hold on, let me look at my Goodreads. Oh, because I'm not... Why didn't that... Hold on, what am I counting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think it accidentally counted one of the books twice, and then the other book is one that I read in March, so it's not gonna be part of this wrap up. So for January and February, the 7, 6, I'll list them and then we'll count. I read My Feral Romance by Tessonja Odette. I read Spark of the Everflame, Glow of the Everflame, and Heat of the Everflame by Penn. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. And I, in February, started reading The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. I started it kind of early February and I finished it mid-March. So I'm probably going to end up talking about that one. I don't know. I might talk about it in this video. And then if I don't, I'll talk about it in the one where I wrap up March and April. Because I'm pretty sure I read the majority of it in February, and then I read like the last quarter in March. So I don't know. I don't really count it as a March read, even though I finished it in March. Before I get into the actual books that are part of this recap, I do have a dishonorable mention, because the first book I started to read in January was actually Quicksilver by Callie Hart, I think is the author. I'm usually kind of avoidant to books that are like super popular, that are like people are ranting and raving about them online and stuff, because I've gotten burned one too many times. I've had quite a few books that people have told me, the internet has told me, was phenomenal, and then it's just not good when I read it. I don't know if it's just me or if it's not actually a good book, but it's just not to my liking, and I end up DNFing. And it's even worse when I've actually physically bought the book, because then I spent money on it, and then I'm annoyed that I spent money on it and I didn't even enjoy it. So I am sort of trying to start reading books in a free way if people are ranting and raving about them online, whether that's through the library or Kindle Unlimited or borrowing it from someone. And then if I do enjoy it, I will buy a copy so I can keep it, because I actually, 1, love to have shelf trophies, but 2, I actually really love to reread books. So yeah. Quicksilver I was reading on Kindle Unlimited right at the start of the year, like January 1st or 2nd I started reading it, and initially I kind of enjoyed it. I was texting one of my friends my friend who got me to read ACOTAR, telling her how great I thought it was, and then I got to a certain point where I was like, I don't know, the relationship started to be really toxic. I love banter. I'm all for enemies or rivals to lovers and stuff, but when all you do is harass each other and there's no real relationship building happening, I'm not a fan. So it was just getting kind of weird, and I did my typical thing where I will like skip to the end of a book to see how it ends, or even like sometimes with like romantasy books, I'll skip to the intimacy scenes and see if like something improves in the relationship that leads to them being intimate. And from what I could see, that's not what happened. So I was just like, it's a no for me. So I ended up DNFing that one, and immediately after DNFing it, I started My Feral Romance by Tessonja Odette. And Tessonja is one of my all-time favorite indie authors. She is my favorite indie author. She's one of my all-time favorite authors in general. She is so much fun, like, to read her writing. She's so freaking talented. She's hilarious. She loves happily ever afters, so pretty much all of her books have a happily ever after guarantee in the description and stuff. And I first found out about her in like 2021, I think. maybe 2022. I would have to look. It's definitely saved in my Goodreads, the first book I read. She has a series of standalones that are fairy tale retellings, mostly like Disney stories. She also has a separate trilogy, and now she is writing new adult romance. All of her other stuff has been YA, essentially. This is new adult, and it's so good. They're all set in the same world. So if you start with the trilogy and you read through the other standalones, it can give you a better concept of the world. But she does a really, really good job with her world building and filling you in if you're coming in and you haven't read about her world yet. A quick explanation that I can give is that there's this island where the Fae had lived for a very long time, and then humans lived on the continent. And then at some point, the humans started moving over to the island, and the cultures started mixing and all that kind of stuff. So the island has Steely and Unseelie courts, and then they also have some like human representatives. Not super relevant to our story, I guess, but My Feral Romance specifically is about these two characters who you actually meet in previous books. You meet one of them in 2 previous books, and you meet the other one in a singular previous book. The girl is a fae. She like shapeshifts into like a little woodland creature, and she is trying to move her way up in human-ish society. She had tried to have like a debutante, like coming out into the world type thing, and it didn't really work because of her social cues being off and social behavior being wrong from being a fae. And then she's an artist. She's trying to further her career, and she needs a human model to help her with some book covers that she's trying to design. And then the male love interest, he's human, and he has kind of gotten disowned from his rich family. He was working as a love advice columnist, and he is trying to publish a book of dating advice, and he needs someone who can help him prove through practice that his love advice works. And so the two strike a deal that she will allow him to love coach her so she can find a romantic interest, because she has other stuff going on where she's on like a time constraint to find a husband, and he needs someone to practice his matchmaking skills on, so he does that with her, and she needs a model, so he volunteers to model for her. And cuteness and hilarity and just like such emotional depth follows. It is so cute. Their flirting and banter is absolutely adorable. Their friendship is very endearing. The things that they do to grow in themselves and in their relationship and socially are just like so sweet. I love it so much. And it was a really great thing for me to read after DNFing Quicksilver, because I literally told my husband, I love banter, but I hate when it's toxic and people are so nasty to each other and da. And then read My Feral Romance, and I was like, this is what I wanted. This is what I'm talking about. I like banter. I like when people are kind of like rivals or whatever, because in the start of the story, he is kind of trying to be friendly with her because they had been friends in the past, and she feels very hurt by him. She expresses that he did some things in their friendship that hurt her feelings, and she doesn't fully trust him yet. And so yeah, it's just really beautiful to see them grow together. And I highly recommend, if you enjoy fantasy, if you enjoy kind of like Bridgerton time period fantasy, if you love a good, quirky, cute romance, definitely check out her books. She's super talented and her books are fantastic. After reading My Feral Romance, I know I had a couple DNFs in January and February. I can't necessarily remember where they fell. I'm gonna have to stop doing this now that I'm doing this channel. But if I DNF a book, I usually just take it off of my Goodreads shelf. But then the problem with that is I lose what date I had read it or tried to read it. So if I'm gonna delete it, I'm gonna need to write down what happened, because I also do not have the memory retention to know when those things happened. I can remember some very odd things, but apparently not that. So I know some of the other books I tried to read this year were Apprentice to the Villain, Five Broken Blades. I actually got pretty far in that and was kind of enjoying it, but it was just too spread out for me. I needed the characters to come together, and it was taking way too long. And there were some characters that I didn't like. I just was so disinterested in them. When the Moon Hatched, I also tried to read Heartless Hunter. I loved the concept, did not like the writing style. So that was a bummer, because I really wanted to do that. And sometimes I can overlook writing style if I'm really, really invested. That didn't happen here. I just couldn't do it. Okay, so that was My Feral Romance. So then next we binged Spark, Glow, and Heat of the Everflame by Penn. And I honestly thought that this was a completed trilogy when I started reading it. And I was finishing, I believe, the second book and getting ready to read the third book when I realized that it was not a completed trilogy and book 4 does not have a release date. Yeah, that's how I felt. I was really, really close to just not even reading the third book because of that. But Penn wrote a wild, wild slow burn. So I had to read the third one to find out when they finally got together. And honestly, if they did not finally get together, I was going to riot. I was sitting there like, if she makes me wait until this fourth book that hasn't even been released, I'm gonna lose it. So I really enjoyed these books. There were things that I did not enjoy. One of them being that the main character, her name is Diem, is so stupid. I really wish the author hadn't written her so dumb, because I feel like it could have been one of the best book series I've ever invested in. But she is so dumb. And it doesn't make any sense why she is so dumb. She is just dumb. And so in the story, it's, you know, it's very like Fae-esque, but we don't have any actual Fae. It's that there were these like deities that came down to Earth and shared their power, but not with everybody, just with some people. And those people, I believe, are called Descended. I don't know. We're reaching back to January. It's been almost 2 months since I read these books. So the Descended are essentially treated like royalty. And then they also have like an area of the city where the like non-royal Descended live. And they're like, their kingdom is run by houses and stuff, and then like each kingdom has its own type of Descended that control different elements and powers and stuff. And then our main character, Diem, she is a human girl, but she starts showing some signs of magic, but she doesn't know why. And also there are times where she flat out uses the magic and it's very obvious that she's used the magic, but she doesn't realize she's used the magic. Like, that happened multiple times and I'm like, how do you not see that you're using magic? You're really in denial of the fact that you have magic. Her mother is human and her father is an unknown donor. She was raised by her mom and someone that her mom got together with shortly after she was born. He raised her as his own. And as someone who has 2 non-biological children that are mine, I love stories that have that. One of my all-time favorite representations of that is A River Enchanted and a Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. That I can't remember their names right now, but there's a woman and she has a young daughter that she adopted when she married her husband, and there's this line, I have it saved in my phone, and it's just like, even though she wasn't from my flesh, I swear our souls were knit together, or something like that. And I'm just like, yes, I feel that so deeply. I love it very, very much. So yeah, but her parents are military, so she's raised learning how to fight. She's learned how to think very critically, and yet she's horrible at thinking critically. And she repeatedly does very, very dumb things. And I read these on my Kindle, and had I been reading physical books, I would have thrown them across the room. But I didn't want to break my Kindle, so I didn't throw it. But essentially, so she starts showing some magic. She interacts with some of the Descended, and she ends up like in the space of the in the first book, in the space of the like royal court. And Luther, who is essentially like one of the princes there, kind of in line for the throne, like everyone assumes he's going to be next in line for the throne. They end up getting close together, and this is a huge spoiler, so skip ahead if you plan on reading this book. The crown passes to DM instead, by magic, and so she becomes the reigning king, queen, or whatever of their kingdom. So then the second book is like that situation ensuing. There are so many situations that continuously happen all throughout the trilogy. When something important is about to happen, someone's about to explain themselves or explain a scenario or stop someone from doing something dumb, and then someone interrupts. I am also guilty of using that. However, I have always been intentional that if I use that in my own writing, I allow someone to finish their sentence afterwards or explain themselves afterwards, because I cannot stand in writing when someone gets interrupted just to avoid furthering the plot and just in order to add turmoil. Like, it stresses me out so much, especially when you as the reader know what's going on and you know that the characters don't get to find out just because someone interrupted. Like, does no one have the capacity to be like, hold on, we're in the middle of an important conversation, please finish your sentence, okay, now go? Like, I don't know, it bothers me. It's a pet peeve. It happened a lot. This was one of the few books where it's like there was like a repeated phrase. I wish I had written it down, because I really wish I could tell you what it was. There was a repeated phrase that I was like, oh, this one again. So yeah, there were parts of it that were just phenomenal. The magic and how the magic worked, how the characters interacted with each other, like things that were going on. It was so cool. And then there were a lot of little tiny things that were kind of annoying. So that was those. Fairly certain that between the Everflame books was when I tried to read 5 Broken Blades, When the Moon Hatched, and Heartless Hunter. Because I had a pretty solid gap where, according to my Kindle, I was still reading every day. But I don't have that time marked on my Goodreads. There's another book called Broken Flames that I tried to read. I had seen it on Instagram and then lost it, and I couldn't remember what it was, and it took me almost a year to find it again. When I found it, I was like, all right, I'm gonna read this. I went to start reading it, and I know for a fact I was not in the right mindset to read it. I definitely needed to be in a different mental space. I think even a different physical space. Sometimes it depends on like where my body is. What time of year it is can heavily impact my ability to read certain books. So that one wasn't working. And then I can specifically remember that with Heartless Hunter, I really wanted to enjoy that. That's another one that I was like, sometimes I can overlook stuff if I really want to enjoy it. I was trying really hard. There were a couple things that I was like, oh, that's not good, but I'm going to overlook it. Oh, that's not good, but I'm going to overlook it. My final straw was the author was repeatedly showing and then telling. And I'm okay if you're going to tell, but don't also show. If you're going to show, just show. Don't tell. We're going to do just one. We don't need to do both. One can do the job by itself. So we either need to tell or we need to show. We had a scene where another character, like, we went and knocked on her door, she opens the door, and then the author describes her appearance. She's disheveled, she looks tired, da 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 da. We have given an explanation that once you read the paragraph, your brain then concludes. She just got woken up. Next line. She looked like I just woke her up. Right, because that's what you just described. We don't need it twice. We need it the one time. So either save us space on the page and just say she looked like I just woke her up, or describe it and then let us understand. We can do the math. It's okay. So that was my final straw because it had already happened like 4 other times and we were like barely 20% into the book, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, I can't do another however much percent of this book is left. I can't keep doing this. Sorry, no. But I really, really wanted to enjoy it. It seemed fun. It seemed interesting. Couldn't finish. That was January. So then in February, I read the first 2 books in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. And towards the end of February, like I said, started, or I guess mid-February, started the 3rd book. The first 2 books I kind of consider a duology because they follow the 2 same characters and have a singular storyline to them. The first 2 books are The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and then The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I've seen those books around a ton, and I never thought to pick them up because I never really knew what they were about. And I didn't have anyone close to me that was reading them, telling me to read them or what they enjoyed. So I stumbled across them because of Kindle Unlimited. So the 2 main characters are Rain and Aurea. Primarily Aurea is the main character. She is the daughter of this like vampire king. They're coming up on this time period where there's this like big trial, similar to like the Hunger Games, where a bunch of vampires are going to be thrown into this fight. The winner of the fight gets a wish granted by Nyaxia, who is essentially the like deity of the vampires. She created the vampires, essentially, is part of the lore in the story. There was very little I did not like about these books. They had a really excellent rivals to lovers story. They reminded me why I like vampire romance, which I haven't read in a very long time. It's been a super long time since I read vampire romance. It was really fun to kind of like go back into that. The character development was really good. It made sense. I get very frustrated when certain parts of character development don't seem to click. And when like people's internal narratives don't match the story. I felt like it matched pretty well. The character and the world building were great. It had a lot of good twists. I will say in book 2, so book 1 they do finish the trial. They do get a wish from Nyaxia. The winner does. And then as a result of that, the hierarchy, I'm doing this without spoilers because I would love for you guys to read these and tell me what you think. Or if you've already read them, tell me what you think. So, trials conclude. The winner gets their wish. As a result of the winning wish, the hierarchy of the vampires crumbles and things are thrown into chaos. And so in book 2, there is a lot of political struggle, some like battle wartime sequence type things. And I understand for writing purposes why you a lot of times will need to have the characters think something is going to work and then it not work, and that creates this struggle. Because if the first time your characters tried something and it worked, you wouldn't have a good story. What you need is your characters to try something and then it not work, and they have to come up with a new plan to make things work. However, it happened so many times. Oh my god, I can't tell you how many times these characters tried to solve the problem and something else happened and they had to regroup again. Oh, it had to have been like 4 or 5 times, and it was so depressing and so frustrating and upsetting, and I was like, if they don't freaking win by the end of this book, I'm gonna be so mad. The good news is they do come out on top. I am gonna spoil the fact that we got a bit of a happy ending, but yeah, just Rain is such a great male main character. Aurea is such a great female character. Their communication and relationship and interactions with each other felt very real, felt very, very believable. And then what happens is that there is a like 3rd character that's like Rain's friend that we meet in the 1st book, and she's also there in the 2nd book. And she is the main character of the 3rd book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. I thought I was going to finish it in February, because actually what happened was February 19th, I had foot surgery and I was in bed for the rest of the month. More or less, like after a while I could get up a tiny bit, but I was definitely like dedicating my time and energy to resting. And I was so sure I was going to read a ton because I was bedridden, and instead I just watched Amazon Prime. I binged the Legend of Vox Machina show, and then when I finished I just started binging Critical Role well, picking up where I left off on my last Critical Role episode, and was binging that. I didn't read barely at all. And then I did finally get back into reading that book and finished it. I was considering DNFing just because I wasn't invested in the story. There was nothing wrong with it. The writing was really good and stuff. I think it was just a type of story that I wasn't as interested in as I feel like some other people could be. I definitely know there are people that book was written for that I'm sure absolutely love that story. It wasn't really meeting any reading needs for me, aside from the fact that I had started it and it was in a world I already knew. The fourth book, I think, is about to come out, and I mean, like, the ending I feel like was a bit of a shock, but at the same time I wasn't super surprised, but it also didn't end in a way that made me be like, oh, I have to read what happens next. But you know, if you read that book and you enjoyed it, I'm really happy, because I think the emotional story in it was really beautiful. I think that Carissa definitely wrote that book for people who will find some catharsis in it and find some relief in it from an inner turmoil that they feel like they haven't seen in a story for them yet. And I really, really hope that if that story spoke to you, that you got to enjoy it, because that's what I love when I read a book and the story really just is like reaches me on an emotional level. It's one of the reasons why I love the A Court of Thorns and Roses book, specifically Mist and Fury. That one really touches me on an emotional level. Anyways, I am going to start writing down my thoughts as I'm reading, so that way when I go to do these recaps, they're a little more concise. Right now I'm reading Carissa Broadbent's Daughter of No Worlds. I've been trying to stop and take some notes as I'm reading, just so that way when I go to do my recap at the end of April or beginning of May, I have better thoughts. I'm actually super excited for that recap because I read Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. That was one of my most anticipated books of the past year. I was dying for that book to come out because her Legendborn cycle is fantastic, and if you haven't read it, please freaking read it because it's so good. Also, I will warn you ahead of time that Oathbound does not conclude the cycle. We have one more book we're waiting to have come out. I think it was originally supposed to be a 3-book series, and then as she was finishing Bloodmarked, if I'm remembering from what I read a couple years ago correctly, when she was finishing writing Bloodmarked, she came to the realization that she was going to make it 4 books, and got approved from the publisher to make it 4 books, and so yeah, now we have 4. Oathbound was a chunky book, and I ate it up. So I cannot wait to recap you on that book, because that's one I've been waiting to talk to someone about, because I got really, the last however many pages of the end of that book just wrecked my life, to the extent that I finished reading them and was like sitting in my living room just like staring at the wall trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life, and my husband walked in and was like, "Are you okay?" And I had to try to very briefly tell him why I was feeling so despondent. And then I kid you not, because that was at nighttime, the next morning I woke up and the first thing that I did was reread the ending to make sure there was not something that I missed, because I really felt like so jarred by the end of that book. And it's so good and it's so upsetting, as the ending of a lot of books can be. So yeah, I hope I have influenced you now to read the Legendborn cycle, so that way you have already read Oathbound by the time May rolls around and I tell you about my thoughts on the book, and then we can discuss it together. So that's what I read in January and February. Let me know what you guys have read so far this year, what you are currently reading, if you've got a current book that you're diving into or coming out of. Let me know what books you have planned to read in March and April. I don't know that I have anything planned so far. I'm just trying to get through Daughter of No Worlds. Oh, I'm also reading Heartless by Marissa Maehrer, because I have a physical of that book, and I talked about that in my newbie BookTube tag. Alright, bye. Lovely. Makeup done, hair done, lights, camera, action. Put the camera in a spot where the lighting and the quality will be good. It's gonna be quick and easy, it'll be fine. Are you smudged? Okay. Hi, I'm Becca, and this is my BookTube. It's okay if there's a quiet moment. I can edit it out in a Fire Endless and oh shoot, a River Enchanted ship. I can hear my daughter singing outside my door. That was pretty cute. Okay, you don't want to hear my ring click against the microphone. Yeah, so A Court of I don't even know if I'm going to keep that in now. That's what I read in January and February. Let me